Let me start by talking about your perception of the mainframe. You know, I started in this industry in mainframes. I was hired to be a mainframe system administrator. And in the early days of mainframes, this is what I looked like. This is a photo of me looking after my IBM system. And for many people that I talk to, this is what they perceive mainframe to be. Even more, when I talk mainframe in most organizations, they imagine this green screen, this 3270 emulator, which is available on a PC or somewhere else, that you're leveraging and using to do work. Now, mainframes are reliable, they're consistent. Some people perceive them as expensive, but the reality of mainframes are that if they disappeared today, tomorrow planes wouldn't fly, people wouldn't get paid, and the economy would come to a grinding halt. It's a reality for all of us. The mainframe is a core component of every major business today. In fact, if you think about who is using mainframes, 92 of the top 100 banks, 23 of the top 25 US retailers, all 10 of the world's largest insurers, and don't forget, 23 of the world's largest airlines. Now, I don't know if I want to say that after recent outages we've had in the airline industry, but the reality of it is that the mainframe is a critical component of everybody today. Now, I've been talking to a lot of your organizations lately at Forrester. We do a lot of research and we go out and we talk to a lot of organizations. And one of the interesting, overwhelming facts I'm hearing today is that the most required, compelling event is speed. We need to go fast. We need to deal with the disruptive areas in the world, and we need to be able to deal effectively with them. We need to be able to change and transition. In fact, I was recently with the CIO of a large insurance company, and he walked into his team who were looking at creating a net new insurance company, and he said, the number one job for all of you is speed. I want velocity to market, I want you to be innovative, and I want you to try net new ideas. Now, many people who've gone and looked at speed have thought, well, we can just sacrifice quality, can't we? We can throw it out the window. One organisation that I've talked a lot with in the UK, they went and decided to go with the DevOps approach. So what they went and did was kind of interesting. They went and surrounded their mainframe with an API layer, and then they wrote net new systems of differentiation around it. And it was a very interesting perspective. The problem was they didn't get the process quite right, and they sacrificed testing. And what happened is they had significant outages in production. That was a lesson learned. Something new, something evolving. Of course, now they've updated their testing process. But if I go back to my head of the insurance company, one of the key things that he talks about is that you need to do speed with quality. Fast is good, but quality is good as well. So you can't sacrifice one without the other. You have to really not focus on the work that you're doing, but creation of value. What is driving the business forward? What's actually helping your organization differentiate or create competitive advantage? What is the right things to do? Not just doing the right things. And the other aspect is that you really want to have all this speed, not just in the current project, but a number of initiatives that are going on today. So it kind of is a changed landscape and a changed world. Now, we all use the Uber example. Uber came along and disrupted cars, and I can give you a personal example from Uber. I no longer rent cars. I now use an Uber car wherever I go, or a Lyft, or whatever the equivalent is in whatever country I'm in. That totally disrupted that industry. So then if you're a rental company now, you've noticed this disruption, and you're looking to create new and innovative and differentiated products, because following the leader is not always the right thing. Talking about following the leader, one of the things that I love is Sam Walton at Walmart, who talks about the changes that are happening to Walmart right now. Walmart are looking at innovating and driving differentiation. They realize they need to change the way they go about their business. And so, people think that you just put a Walmart store in and suddenly people will come. Actually, no. Walmart differentiate by using big data and intelligence and replacing inventory with information. Another retailer that I've worked closely with have a really novel approach now where they've integrated systems of differentiation with their back-end mainframe. What they do now is they look online and they look at sales online and they look at the geography of those sales online, And where they see those sales online in a certain area, they will ship inventory to the local stores, suddenly identifying that as soon as they put inventory in the store, they can grow their local revenue, because not everybody shops online and everybody has a different way of doing things. Alternatively, because they're now monitoring sales, they can actually transition the way they go about their business. So if a store in my hometown of Shoreham, New York has too much inventory and this item is selling over in another store in New York, they can actually move that inventory automatically. This is part of the distribution, the using of this data, using big data for intelligence. Now, whenever I talk about mainframe, people talk to me about cloud, and they say, well, isn't cloud taking over the world? And it's true that cloud computing is being adopted, and we're seeing multi-cloud adopted as well. And if you look at what's happening here in terms of this, we're seeing platform as a service and infrastructure service as being adopted. We are seeing private clouds adopting, and we are seeing more and more use of these clouds, but typically they're being used in conjunction with major enterprises with a mainframe. So if you think about it for a moment, modern apps are hybrid, they're composite, there's multiple components to them, and of course they're multi-channel, meaning they'll be delivered in different vehicles. You won't just deliver to a 3270 screen anymore. You're going to deliver to an iPhone app, tablet, maybe an Android, maybe some device I haven't even thought of yet. Maybe you're going to do an iPhone watch app as well. But the reality of it is that if you think about all these systems and all this information, it all relies on an integrated ecosystem of components, pieces coming together. So traditionally, the reality of this is that we have this new world which is totally connected, which is multiple components, and if you thought complexity was going away, complexity is going to continue. It's going to get worse. It's going to get more interaction is going to be required. So if you look at this today, you're going to have a combination of SaaS applications, you're going to have some local data, you're going to have, of course, your workload portability in the future. Maybe you're a multinational company and you've got workloads happening all over the place. So you're going to have to deal with compliance and industry regulations in different countries. And then ultimately, the back end, you've got your mainframe serving up and delivering the value in these basic transaction processing systems where you're adding value. One of the things we need to do today, and one of the things I hear consistently from you, is that you want to be able to go faster. You want to be able to deliver value. You want to be able to drive out the value that's locked in your mainframe and make it available to the rest of these distributed applications. And this is a key aspect. The ecosystem is important. It's not just about replacing the mainframe, which is what some people talk about. It's actually organizations that are forward-thinking are leveraging the mainframe for goodness. I was visiting with a large financial organization just the other day, and one of the things they said to me is we're getting extreme pressure from some areas to actually replace the mainframe. And I said, well, how many lines of code do you have? And they said, we have 65 million lines of COBOL code. Yeah, it's okay, it's normal. I was in a bank. We had 65 million lines of COBOL code too, I think. But the reality of it is that the value is not in taking and rewriting those back-end mainframe applications. The value is in the ecosystem and the way you can actually derive that, use that information for intelligence and use it to pull it out. So you've heard a lot about this term DevOps, right? The merging of dev and operations together. It's a cultural thing. We all work together in teams. We love each other and we hug each other, right? That's DevOps. Well, that's what it was when it first started. I remember going to DevOps meetups and we get together and we talk about changing this culture and all being one and loving each other. And we'd start the day by having hug sessions. Now that didn't work in some cultures, by the way. But the reality of it is that if you think about it, I've been in this industry over 25 years and we've been talking about merging dev and ops for 25 years. It hasn't happened successfully yet, but maybe we now have a chance. But what DevOps is about taking the tools and the practices, cultural changes, that's going to allow us to deliver automated software. We're going to be able to deliver it automatically, and we're going to be able to really drive the customer value that we talk about. And we've been talking automation for many years, haven't we? And most organizations I visit actually do automation in silos. We actually have to take a holistic view across the whole stack, and I'll talk more about that in just a moment. So, what's the value of DevOps? Puppet did a report that's just been released, this 2016 report, and there's some really interesting data in here. There's high-performing teams, medium-performing teams, and low-performing teams. Now, high-performing teams have adopted a culture where they go and they work together, they collaborate, they share ideas, there's a no-blame culture, and they look at what they're deploying. They break work down into smaller chunks, smaller pieces, reducing complexity, decreasing the rate of error. They do automated testing, so that the code, once it's compiled and moved along, is automatically tested. And then they automatically, or in some cases, automatically, maybe even promote to production. There's a few of you a bit scared right now because I said automatically promote to production. But the reality of it is that we have a lot of process in place that actually adds little value. We'll talk more about that in just a few minutes. But if you look at what we're doing now in terms of this, 200 times more frequent deployments. Now, I don't want you to deploy necessarily on your mainframe every day. But I've recently visited organizations that have 1 major deployment a year and 2 minor. That's it. I recently was talking yesterday to an organization that just went from 6 to 12 mainframe deployments a year. They're ecstatic. And I'm not saying that you need to promote change to production every day, but wouldn't it be good to get a velocity where you're actually implementing not so complex change, better tested change, and that change is implemented in a way that adds value so that you're not running long-running projects. Of course, one of the things we see with an integrated life cycle is lower change failure. And of course, ultimately, we have shorter lead times to value. These are all critical aspects that every one of you is looking to deliver in your business. So people ask me where the heat is in DevOps and what industries are doing it. And Forrester, we've done, my colleague Amy DiMartine did this great heat map at Forrester. And one of the things she looks at here is where are the areas? So the darker equals the areas of heat in DevOps. And of course, applications are high, e-commerce and websites, logically high, and of course, mobile apps. But look at the industries. Services is high, and then you look at manufacturing as well. But I can tell you this year, finance and insurance is absolutely hot. Inquiry after inquiry is coming from that sector. So I am seeing these organizations that you thought couldn't change because of compliance, couldn't change their processes, really look to become innovative. And when you look into the back into the data, you can see why. At the moment, the financial industry is suffering under fintechs. These little startups that break the rules, change the game, change the landscape, and play differently. And every industry will ultimately be disrupted. And that's one of the reasons why we need to transform what we're doing and how we do it. I believe the mainframe is relevant. Some more Forrester data here for you. And if you look at, you look on this data, and this is what IT professionals are really working on and what they're concerned about, and you can see that mainframe is clearly high on this list. It's an area that we really care about and that we are concerned about. And one of the things we've also seen in Forrester data is that mainframes, I can share with you, are not going away. We are not seeing mainframes disappear. In fact, one of the things I clearly see is that MIPS, total number of MIPS, are actually increasing. And if you look at that, we're actually seeing a situation where organizations are actually looking to bring more core work back onto mainframes and then move all the systems of differentiation off elsewhere. So, another great quote I got recently. Management says, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But these applications are fundamentally broken. They're fundamentally there. We've got spaghetti code. You just can't see the cracks and resolve it. So I believe fundamentally we're reaching this point, this pivotal point where we actually have no choice but to look at how we go and look at our total ecosystem, look at how we go and leverage the mainframe, and look at how we go and transition into this network of applications that we have. So I love DevOps. if you don't know, in the opening keynote today, I was very excited. I heard DevOps mentioned more than once. And the reality of it is, I'm not so set on the title, by the way. If you can come up with a better title than DevOps, let me know. I'll happily sponsor that. But the reality of this is that what we're looking to do is change the way we're going about doing our traditional business. So I worked in a retail bank. Many of you know that. And I worked there for many years. We had a traditional banking system rewrite. And we started on that rewrite. It was considerable investment by the organization. It was totally waterfall. We took 2 years to code the system. We implemented it. We had to double the help desk for the first month after we implemented it because we had so many calls. We had to double the customer service center for 2 months because no one knew how to use it. And we had to tell the branch staff to go out and stand next to the ATMs so that we could teach the customers how to actually use the ATMs that we'd changed. Retail came back to us about a month later and said, "You implemented a brilliant system for 2 years ago." It was exactly what we wanted 2 years ago, but the world has moved on. Do you know about this thing called internet banking? Do you know about this thing called whatever? And the reality of it is that long development cycles with detailed requirements are as good as the requirements are at the point of inception. Requirements are changing, and I have run many projects in IT, and I've never delivered exactly what the customer wanted first time, ever. Maybe some of you have, and if you could tell me your secrets later, that'd be excellent. But the reality of this is that requirements change over time. And I think this is part of what we're at. What we're trying to do here in DevOps is we want to split change into smaller incremental components. We want to reduce the complexity, as I said before. And what you can then do is move that change through the life cycle, implement it, look at it, make sure it's what you want. And then if you've got to go back and iterate, that's fine. I solved this problem in my own home life because I like new cars. So what do? I lease a new car and I can change it every 18 months. It's awesome, right? But that's still too long for me. So I need a DevOps version of leasing cars. That'd be great. It's called renting cars or Uber, I guess. But the reality of it is that we have to change the way we're going about doing things. I love this metric. You've heard it all over the show. Mean time to resolution. It's about resolving things quickly. You know, one of the interesting things that I'm starting to hear is a culture change. A culture change where organizations now are not necessarily concerned about the fact that change fails. All right, it's horrible. Change fails. But what do you do when it fails? Well, now we want to focus on the resolution. One of the things we're starting to see in DevOps cultures is what we call change forward or roll forward, where we actually go and say, you know what, it's not quite right, it didn't quite work, but what we're going to do is fix it. What you'll then go and do is fix it and, of course, move forward. You can also roll back, where you actually go and implement your change in such a way that you can automatically fall back. One of the things we focus on at Forrester is tools that will help in that space. And I think you can look at those tools, and this is where we talk about release automation. Release automation tools allow you to roll forward into production, implement, and should you have an error, roll back or roll forward. And these are one of the things we look at now as we want to resolve that mean time to repair. Now, you know, one of the aspects of technology is that you might not be happy with a failure and a change, but the reality of it is that, and I see this happening in the younger generation especially, given I'm grey now, I can say that, the reality is that we see them actually being quite patient when IT fails. I know the biggest failure in my house is when the Wi-Fi goes down. But that's, you know, the reality of it is, if I talk to my children about it, they say, it's okay, I'll be back in a moment. And that's kind of the attitude we're starting to see now. Now, I'm not sure I want this mean time to repair to be really high if I'm having a heart bypass. I'm pretty sure in that situation I want 100% availability and 100% continuity and connectivity. But that's the reality of where we are. We've actually got to make risk-based decisions on change. We've got to understand what the risk is, what the business impact, and we've got to start to moderate the process, the level of testing, and how we go about it based on the different types of change and the different types of risk. It's a great example here, you know, and if we look at systems of engagement, and this is an overly simplified diagram in front of you right now. And if you look at what's happening here, in terms of what happens. This could be any application. You can replace this with anything. The reality of it is that if you look at the way we develop today, it's really going to be different in terms of the system we deliver, the risk associated with it, and what that information is. But what is going to be true is the complexity. So one of the things I tell people is you really need to understand the complexity of what you're doing, how that risk works, how you're going to link it together. Now, in the mainframe, we are totally risk averse, typically. We believe every change to the mainframe will impact a major ecosystem. Maybe it will, maybe it won't. But actually, often we don't have the intelligence to know that, or the insight, or the capability. So one of the things we need to really start to do is understand the configurations that are in play. You know, DevOps is not an excuse for no documentation. In fact, DevOps practices talk about documenting better. What DevOps is about getting that life cycle right and doing it in a smaller, more incremental way. So, where do you start? Okay, Rob, you've convinced me. I want to do DevOps. We're going to run away now and we're going to do DevOps, okay? In fact, we'll skip the rest of the event and we'll all go straight down the road to a DevOps session. But the reality is, if I look at where people start, well, there's a lot of areas you can start really simply. And this data comes from Puppet Labs as well. So the first thing is something simple like deployment automation. Have you automated how you deploy? Have you gone and transitioned that process so that you are de-risking it by removing as much of the human element as possible? That's a critical aspect. That's actually where a lot of organizations fail today. When I look at how DevOps is done today, most organizations go and they'll go and build the code successfully, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. They'll test it. They'll go and prepare it and do integrated testing and system testing. And then what they'll go and do is say, okay, we're done. Let's just toss it over the wall to operations. And they can rebuild it and implement it again. We've lost that knowledge that we've gained in the process. We've lost that information. Now, I don't know how many of you have dealt with that change request. Don't you love those change requests? You know, what do you do when you code and you get it ready? The day before you're going to implement, you raise the change and you realize you've missed the window. So what you do is you make it an urgent change. Then you go and get 5 senior managers to sign off on it. Then you just rebuild it, and then you roll it into production, and it fails, so you back it out. Then everybody comes in and you have emergency changes, right? We just suddenly have lost what we've learned in the process. So one of the things we talk about in DevOps is about joining this process together end to end. It's about bringing it all together. And this process in a distributed world is no different to a mainframe world. In fact, many of you here will tell me that you're already doing most of these good practices. This is not new to us. I don't know how or where we lost it, but we lost it somewhere. And I think we lost it in process. So let's look at this. Idea proposed. Great, we've got some ideation. We've got lots of stuff. Every developer's working on too many things. 10 projects all at once. If you look at an agile methodology, you're going to be in a team, you're going to be working on a sprint, you're going to have a backlog, you're going to burn it down, you're going to deliver that, you're probably going to deliver a branch, and you're going to merge that branch into a trunk, if you're using scaled agile or something like that. And then after you've merged that together, you're going to go to automated testing. As you go to automated testing, you're going to check if you've got a release condition code, release ready code. If it passes your tests, maybe you're ready. Maybe you're actually going to merge 2 sprints together before you release. Maybe you're going to merge 3. Doesn't matter. Organizational constraint and decision. But when you do that, you've got to go back and retest again, right? And what we're seeing is that these testing stages are now becoming automated. As these branches come together, we're doing automated testing. We're getting the results. We're giving feedback back into our repository. We're identifying defects, and we're resolving them for the next level. This is good practice. This is good organization. This is good use of time. And what happens is as you build these test scripts together, as you build these life cycles together, you develop mental muscle and team muscle to become structured in the way you do things. As you go from there, this is where sometimes we see the walls. You have a release decision. Do we release or not? The answer is yes. You deploy the solution. The reality for this is, as you deploy, you're then determining if you delivered customer value. This is where the life cycle, and by the way, a better way of drawing this is a circle. And there's other diagrams that represent this as a circle. There's feedback in every loop, there's information, and it gives you guidance on how to go forward. So if you look at this, right now there's a lot of bottlenecks in here. You know, right now, even in our mainframe environments, we have some challenges. First, typically in traditional shops, the information flow is one way. We're not getting the feedback until we actually implement. That feedback is not going back into the process. Development environments. Are you delivering production-esque environments? Are you virtualizing production environments or production test scenarios? You know, there's an earlier time in my career where we did this really well. We actually delivered production environments, we had great testing labs, we had physical labs then. Today we have service virtualization. So you can actually virtualize those environments. You can deliver them, you can look at these ecosystems. There's multiple ways of looking at this. As you move forward from there, are you also giving development copies of production-like environments? A term in the industry at the moment is infrastructure as code, where you go and look at your infrastructure representation, you codify that, and you pass that back into the development lifecycle. How often do we go and we test in development on the latest versions of all of our mainframe tools, latest version of the database, latest version of the operating system, latest patch level? We roll over to production, it's one patch level behind. When you wonder why you have errors, it's like we're implementing in a non-like environment. We have to look at that. We have to actually structure, by the way, our operating environments so they become part of the same life cycle. That's part of the key aspect here. We need to be sure that we're testing on production-esque or production representations. This is critical to success. This is critical to doing what we're doing. Now, once you've done that and you've deployed and you've solved these problems, of course, you've got customer delight. Now, every time I see something, a new operating system or a new solution, there's always customer feedback. Always something wasn't quite right. I didn't like it blue, I want it red, I didn't want it green, I want it pink, so on and so forth. That becomes part of the ideation process and goes back into the process. That becomes part of what the developer then sees in the backlog, and of course you prioritize, groom the backlog, and burn it down. All part of good practice and all part of where we're going to in terms of where we are. So where are we in terms of this world? Well, early on slide 4 or 5, I showed you a green screen, right? And it was really boring. I don't know about you, but I can still code in COBOL. So, you know, there's a few people here who can do that. I still remember writing assembler. I still remember the various zaps we used to do in the mainframe. But, you know, most developers are now looking for a development environment. I mean, it's no secret that the traditional mainframe developer is aging. Don't know if I'm allowed to say that publicly, but they are, right? And the reality of it is, if you think about it, we're now faced with a new generation of mainframe developers. They want to be doing the cool stuff, working in slick environments, using interactive development environments, looking at these types of enterprise languages that make them valuable, that actually allow them to go faster. We've actually seen, in terms of on the mainframe, a lot of development there. You can actually do Java on the mainframe now, you can do Eclipse, you can do all sorts of stuff like that. We've got ZOS and Z-Linux as well. These environments are starting to support this. You're now starting to see these user environments where you can now start to work in something that's more akin to what you would see in a distributed world. That's a really good start. That really helps. That really attracts people. In fact, you now start to see these people now being trained to work on mainframe and mainframe systems. Modern development practices. Once again, I already alluded to this. We used to see these. I don't know where they went to. They disappeared somewhere. We need to look at modern development practices, the same things I talk about. We need to have syntax completion, code checking, and integrated debugging. We need to be bringing that in. It needs to be automated processes. We need to be automatically checking code in. We need to be automatically compiling it. We need to be automatically testing it. We need to be automatically building branches together. We need to automatically be understanding dependencies. These are things that we absolutely need to do because that will keep our developers in the process. That will keep them invested in what we're doing. And then, of course, if you get greater developer productivity, you're going to have higher quality code, and a larger resource pool to use from. They're going to have more time available. As we'll see later today, one of the things we've seen is where you actually drive developer productivity, you get more time for coding, more time to generate lines of valuable code that ultimately turn up as value to your customers. This is an interesting topic in terms of virtualization. So in testing, there's lots of testing tools, right? The challenge with testing is not the tools. There are tools. The challenge with testing is, are we testing on production-ready environments? Are we testing on production-like environments? Now, I'm not saying shut down production for the night while you do testing. What I'm looking at is you need to transform the way you create these environments. Using COCS when I'm here, if you're using COCS or COCS or something like IMS maybe, you need to be able to virtualize that, and it's capable of doing that. You can do that, you can deliver that. You can deliver these virtual environments so that you can test against. You need to be able to prepare fresh COS and fresh Linux environments so that you can actually partition them off and test against them. This is available today. The mainframe doesn't stop you doing it. The mainframe allows you to do it. You might have some licensing restrictions. You can go and look at that. But you can virtualize these environments. You can deliver these. And the reality of this is higher test coverage. I can't stress this enough. One of the good practices here is you need to have your developers or your QA group, whichever you use, look at your testing process and write the tests first. When you're going to bring down some ideation into a development chain and write that code, you need to change your culture and practice so that test scripts are a high priority, not a low priority. You need to get that testing in. And by the way, every time you promote to production and you have a failure, that is yet another opportunity to learn what needs to go into the testing environment. This is huge. This single change will change the result rate of your performance by getting that testing in place, by ensuring it. And you need to use automated tests. You need to be able to take the testing burden off people so they're not manually running them. Now, I'm not saying that people won't run them, but the reality of it is I'm human, you're human. The reality of manual testing is you might miss a test, you might miss a result, and automated testing will give you good feedback, which you can then use in your development lifecycle to determine where you are. Do you move forward? Do you not? And of course, this is one of the key pivotal components to higher quality. The right testing and better testing will lead to higher quality out the other end. Big believer in automation, surprise, surprise. Automation is key. We've had automation tools for a long time. The reality of it is, typically they end up in the domain of operations and just stay there. In a DevOps lifecycle, we need to move them left. We need to shift them left so we're starting to use them. We need to be understanding what those automation tests look like. We need to be able to do test code modules, and we need to provide feedback to developers. One of the practices used by lots of organizations now is we check in code at the end of the day, we run our compiles and our tests overnight, we come in the next morning, and we look at that. Now that's not a new good practice, that's just one we kind of maybe let slip. This is where testing automation really plays, where you can do simulated testing. You can use APIs. You can use APIs and stub those APIs. So what you can do is write an API test set that will fire at the application overnight or during the day or whenever you want. These are clever ways of solving this problem. You know, testing has been for too long something that we've kind of avoided. It's just too hard. And you know, we'd actually avoid it. And I think this is one of the areas that we really need to look at and work on. I've talked a lot about virtualization already, and I'm a big believer in this. We have the capability and the technology to virtualize today. You can virtualize the end-to-end ecosystem, you can virtualize synthetic transactions, you can virtualize whatever you want to do. And I think this is the key aspect, the key word is in line 2 here. You need to stimulate production systems in test. It needs to be as close to production as possible. It's a key point that I consistently share, because if you don't do that, you end up in a situation, as we talked about earlier, where you promote into a non-like environment. It's a big challenge. And for many of us, and I've talked to a lot of you already about this, and one of the things I hear from you is, we just can't do it. We're constrained, we're hamstrung. We don't have the right environments or the right tools. You know, one of the things you need to look at is what is the use case to solve that problem? How do we solve it? What do we do? How do we put it together? There are good tools that you can look at for this, and I think it's one of the areas that you should invest and look at, of course. My favorite topic, continuous integration. I also have a second favorite topic, which is continuous deployment. But continuous integration is really about building and testing everything that you do all the time. It's about bringing all the components together. Now, in a mainframe environment, in a hybrid area, where you've got multiple artifacts and multiple systems and solutions coming together, this is a key aspect. This comes back to how do we build that application. Now, one of the things that we've learned in DevOps is that what you deliver out of this is a bill of materials as you go and move things forward. That bill of materials forms an excellent artifact to leverage and use as you integrate and then take forward to production as a guide. Even if you do manual production and do it all over again, the bill of materials will provide you the components, the elements, and you can also look at dependency mapping tools as well to actually show you all the dependencies that are in that piece of code. You know, back in last time I was working in the bank, one of the things we did is we actually scanned all the code coming from development, looked for all the dependencies, and built our dependency map off that to ensure that we knew every element that was touched, everything that was going to change, and also everything we needed to test when we're in production to verify and validate that change. Once again, it's some process, and it's hard to do manually. You need to put it in place automatically. There's loads of opportunities here for you to do automatic building, bringing things together, and also ultimately use your source repository, whatever it is and wherever it is, to really manage that code consistently. So we come up with a great quote here: refactoring mainframe applications into smaller components with managed APIs helps organizations improve the speed at which they deliver. Randy Hefner, my peer at Forrester, wrote this in his API management document. This is a key aspect to what we're doing in the mainframe. This is what we're really starting to see organizations start to consider. APIs and API management really helps drive interaction in mainframes. You heard a lot about it earlier this morning in the keynote. I believe this is one of the tools you have to really drive your mainframe productivity and expose the components, the aspects of it forward. Now, once again, I gave an example earlier about the organisation that's doing that in the UK. Now, a large bank that I've recently talked to, what they've gone and done is they've wrapped their mainframe power through APIs now, and that allows the mainframe to maybe be upgraded every month or 3 months, and distributed can go on a much higher rate and pace of change. Now, their dependency from time to time will be value in the API. But the reality of it is the API, when that's going to be rolled out and updated and published, is published. And this is one of the powerful options that you have. It requires a little bit of thought. Now, some people say, well, Rob, that's a really great statement, hard to do. So what you can do is actually pick elements of your mainframe apps and write the APIs around those. That's totally doable. And this is one of the aspects of really driving value here. So I talked before about DevOps adding value, and this is out of the Puppet Labs report from this year. And if you look at this, and you know, the rates are unbelievable if you look at this. So in terms of change failure rate, you look at some data here. And by the way, you can download this report, it's available free. And if you look at the 1,460 deploys a year, well, I don't know if I want to do that in the mainframe. But I do want to do 12, maybe I want to do 6, I want to do more. But what I want to do is deploy around it, and deploy into it, and deploy with it. That becomes critical. The interesting stat here is as you split change into smaller chunks, as you test better, as you deliver better, your change failure rate decreases 75%. Now, we've talked, and I've been an advocate for this in the past, about putting great process around change. I'm not advocating that we remove that process. What I'm advocating is we shift the testing left, we look at the whole life cycle, and as we go to the right and we deliver to production, we absolutely know what we're doing, it's well tested, it's well thought out, it's smaller change, so it's less complex, and as we go to production in smaller batches, it will drive additional value. So, one of the organizations that I've been talking to recently, it's a financial service organization. They've truly been leveraging the power of DevOps on the mainframe to drive differentiation in their business. Their mainframe has been there for probably 30, 40 years. They've written their own banking application. It's got lots of code in it, lots of process, lots of information. Very simple change they've done is they've gone and looked at how they integrate the mainframe into the continuous delivery pipeline. So the mainframe is now part of that. What they've gone and done is said, right, we're now going to monthly updates. We're changing the batches that we do change in that mainframe. That mainframe will now we'll add value to it, we'll add information to it. And one of the things they've actually discovered in terms of doing their distributed applications is they've found that there's more information required in the mainframe. They've actually now found more fields that they want to capture, more intelligence that they want to get in their customers, and they want to centralize that back in the mainframe. So what happens is every month, where there's that type of information identified, that change goes back into the mainframe, it's updated, everything's accessed through an API, and we drive out the value. The other thing they've done is continuous deployment. What they're doing is living the DevOps methodology, and the code that is tested in development, tested in QA, goes directly to staging, is assessed for production worthiness, and that code is used as the base to transition to production. It's a very interesting process. They've gained significant velocity in doing that. They've gained significant competitive advantage, and the reality of it is it's helped them keep up with the fintechs in their market. And in their market, they're suffering dramatic competition from multiple fintechs. And now the public face of the bank is that it's changing regularly, it's updated regularly, and driving value. So as we come to recommendations and the end of the session, a couple of recommendations. First, you need to think about modernizing your mainframe applications if you haven't already. You need to provide that for the developer at a minimum. You need to be able to drive the value for them. You need to be able to really help them to see the value in what they're doing, to not just their work, but the organization. One of the things is a cultural thing. People talk about the mainframe and devalue the mainframe. The mainframe is critically important to all those businesses that are dependent on it. Second thing is look at your digital initiatives. As you need changes to the mainframe, ensure that you're funding them through the digital initiative. A new internet banking or a new web-based app, if there's a mainframe component, that should be funded through that as well. You need to look at your funding models. Often it's left out, and you end up in a situation where we can't change the mainframe because there's no funding. Modern tools goes without saying, and I think that's a cool aspect we need to look at. You need to review your tools, you need to look at what you're doing with them and how you're delivering them. And start from the back basis, the mainframe is not different. People tell me you can't do application delivery, you can't do velocity, you can't do DevOps in the mainframe. That's not true. You can absolutely do it on the mainframe. You mightn't go at a change a day or 2 changes a minute or whatever rate that other systems go with. You probably could if you put the automated processes in place. But the reality of it is you can go faster. You can actually drive forward. One final story I'll give you on that is one organization decided to move their mainframe to monthly releases. They went from quarterly to monthly. The business came back and said, we can't consume your rate of change at the rate you're changing. It was a great conversation because it showed that the IT had delivered value to the business was seeing it, the business couldn't consume it at the same rate. It gave a great opportunity for the business and IT to look forward to. Finally, and I haven't talked about containers, which is my favorite topic at the moment, containers are coming. You've probably heard the term Docker. One of the things, do some research, do some thinking, have a look at how containers will impact the mainframe. Especially if you're running Z-Linux, that will offer you an opportunity to potentially end up in an environment where you're going to run containers. Containers will change the way you deliver to production, it will change your velocity, and it will change the way apps sit. So with that said, my time is done. I want to thank you for joining me today. And according to my clock here, we have 3 seconds for questions. So what I'll do is say thank you very much, and I'll hang around for questions at the end. Thank you, everyone.